let's go back in time a little bit, and could you tell me a little bit about the role that Sports Illustrated played in your path to writing and kind of the impact it had on you as a kid?
Yeah, for sure, man. I grew up kind of in the middle of a cornfield, middle of nowhere, Indiana, in a tiny little town called Hartford City. And, this was the 80s. So this was pre-digital world. It was certainly way pre the internet and phones. And kind of in a town like that, your link to the outside world was whatever magazines you were reading or whatever you were watching on the four channels you got or on cable or whatever. My dad got me a Sports Illustrated subscription. I was a big sports guy growing up, loved football, loved boxing, played football, boxed, kind of throughout my life. And so I would run to the magazine, I would immediately flip through it and look for football stories and love the pictures initially. But what I didn't realize at a young age was that I was getting a lot of great writing in Sports Illustrated. George Plimpton wrote for it and Dan Jenkins and some of these heavy hitters, some of these guys that as I grew up and got into the business myself, I would realize were legitimately great writers, regardless of subject matter. So as I got a little bit older, I started to gravitate to the Rick Riley column on the back page, which was always one page. So it was always like 700 words, funny, poignant, opinionated. He had this voice, he had this swagger about him that I really loved. And at that time, writing professionally myself wasn't even a glimmer in my eye, but I really loved kind of having the magazine in my life every week through childhood and young adulthood.
Absolutely. So, fast forwarding to today, what were some of the primary factors that's kind of driving them out of business?
Well, I mean, I think the fact that people don't have that kind of relationship with magazines anymore. The magazine was something that filled the time when you were bored, and that may scan as like a low view of it, but I don't know, when you're a kid and your mom drags you to the grocery store, you kill 30 minutes in the magazine section flipping through a sports magazine, or you're waiting at a doctor's office, or you go to a friend's house, they leave the room for a couple of minutes and you flip through their magazines. I mean, it was just this thing that in a pre-internet world kind of let other people know what you were interested in, and it kind of fed and cultivated your own interests. And in the case of Sports Illustrated, it was really a showcase for award-winning photography and writing, and it kind of gave sports people a little bit of culture. And I think once we started to have the internet and certainly now that we have social media, people don't have that kind of relationship with sports anymore. You're in it for information. You're in it to fire off hot takes. The outrage has kind of become the fun, as it were. And a thing like Sports Illustrated doesn't have a place in that model, really.
Did they try to adapt to that, do you feel like even replacing good journalism with those hot takes and such?
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you look at SI online now, it's like every quote unquote story is just like a long tweet. It's like a couple of paragraphs of, I don't know, breaking news or some guy's kind of not very well written opinion, and then like 74 clickbait ads at the bottom. And it kind of took a thing to me that had some romance in it. It was kind of romantic, the idea of getting published in Sports Illustrated, or certainly being on the cover of Sports Illustrated. It put you at the level of a certain kind of cultural item. But yeah, I mean, getting a 300-word tweet written about you with clickbait all over it, like it de-romanticized the whole thing pretty quick.
Do you think this is symptomatic of a bigger issue for print journalism, or is this, confined to something that Sports Illustrated was doing?
Well, here's what I'm encouraged by. I think there's still no shortage of good writers writing good stories. They're just coming out in different places. I think of somebody like, Wright Thompson at ESPN does one of these like 6,000 word features every year or a couple times a year. They're always beautifully written, well researched, impeccably interviewed. I teach them in my classes, and there's guys like Chuck Klosterman still writing great features, and they're out there. You just have to kind of know where to look. Every once in a while on like GQ or Esquire, you run across an amazing feature and you're like, ah, good, somebody's still doing this. I mean, we have great writers at World who are talented on the Christian side. So you have to know where to look for it. It's not coming out in the usual spots anymore. And because I teach journalism at a university, I have to kind of be professionally bullish on it still. But I think as a lover of great writing and as a writer myself and a fan of great writing, I'm still actually bullish on it.
Sure. And so on that topic, what was some of the good that we can take away from how Sports Illustrated covered sports for so many years?
Oh gosh, I mean, I think they cared for people's stories really well for the most part, and they would kind of do it in the old style of you're going to spend a week with a subject or you're spending a few days and you're really drinking in that person's surroundings. You're getting a lot of action, you're getting some anecdote. All the stories had a strong angle, and there seemed to be a real value placed on the writer's process. It wasn't just like, boom, here's 600 quick words on college football realignment or whatever. It seemed to be a place where things were done at the highest level, whether that was the voicey opinion piece or the feature or the photography, the design. Stuff was done at a really high level, which I think mirrored the athletes doing things at a high level that Sports Illustrated was kind of inspired by. So as writers and as somebody who teaches writing, that's something we can take away from it. As a sports writer, I never wanted to just be a sports writer. I wanted to be a real writer who happened to write about sports. And that was always kind of an aspirational thing for me. And I think Sports Illustrated was a great place to find work like that.
Yeah, I agree. Last question. Some of the highlights. What were some of the most memorable issues for you?
Oh man. Growing up in the Jordan era, there was a lot of Jordan coverage for the 90s Bulls. That was a lot of fun. I was a football guy, so I always loved the college and pro football spectacular. I loved the one with Brian Bosworth holding Jim McMahon on his shoulders. These were two athletes with a ton of personality. I think athletes are a little bit boring now. I think the internet was supposed to be this wild experiment in self-expression, and people's personalities are really going to come out, but I think it's done the opposite thing in that the fear of the immediate feedback loop has kind of hammered everybody into the same pretty narrow mold. I mean, you're only allowed to have certain takes on certain things, but in a pre-internet world, you had Brian Bosworth kind of having his own personality and Jim McMahon having a personality and Tony Mandarich, the incredible bulk on that cover, which was kind of iconic, having a personality. And, there was real entertainment value to it. Charles Barkley, early career Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, all these guys kind of had distinct personalities from one another. And I think the internet has sort of shunted that. And that was an outcome that I certainly didn't see it coming. I don't think a lot of people did.
Yeah, I remember reading, I think yesterday, that Jordan also had kind of a complicated relationship with Sports Illustrated, which is kind of fun. You don't hear about that often. Is like one publication he kind of has
Yeah,
beef with because they, they publish something a certain way, and he's like, I'm not going to talk to your reporters anymore. Or
totally.
Even LeBron being called the chosen one months before going to the NBA. That was Sports Illustrated. So
That's
yeah,
right.
there's a cool history there that you can't really replace.
Yeah, it used to move the cultural needle, back when we had a monoculture, so years ago, everybody's getting the same issue out of their mailbox on Thursday, and the cultural needle is kind of moving because of it. And, now with everybody reading everything kind of scattershot, machine gun style on Twitter or whatever, there's no real monoculture. Nobody's saying to anybody else, did you see the Sports Illustrated piece on Jordan or whatever? We kind of lost that. And I think in losing it, we've lost a little bit of the joy of sports as a thing that brings people together.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the questions I have. Is there any other comment you want to add? I just want to open the floor for that.
Uh, I don't think so. It was a lot of fun. I'm probably like literate because of it, because as a sports loving kid growing up in Indiana, you weren't getting a lot of literature in your life. So I probably owe my literacy to it. And they sent out great gifts. Like the gift that you would get for subscribing for years was a phone shaped like a football. So that was my first phone. I had that in my room, would call girlfriends with it, would call, my fiance with it eventually. And yeah, good times.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, I
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the time to talk, and I'll be sure to send you the finished product
Yeah,
once
sounds
it goes
good,
to
man.
air. I think it may be a week or so before we actually run it because we're going to do some more reporting on it. But
Okay.
thanks for taking time today.
Yeah, right on, dude. Thanks for thinking of me. It was a fun time.